Your Honor, he made a bet, $2,000, just to sleep with me, then vanished and left me alone, with our 3 newborns fighting for life in incubators. Sophia Bennett's voice shook the courtroom, echoing off the marble walls of the Chicago Superior Court. Her hands trembled as she clutched the wooden railing, her eyes blazing with tears that refused to fall. Cameras flashed like 1,000 tiny lightning bolts, catching every twist of pain in her face. Reporters murmured to each other, their pens scratching furiously on yellow legal pads. Even the judge leaned forward, his stern face folding into a grim frown. Eric Johnson, standing barely 10 feet away, flinched as though her words had physically struck him. His once confident posture collapsed, inward shoulders slumping beneath the weight of every eye in the room. Sophia's voice dropped lower, trembling yet somehow stronger. And now, after 12 years, he crawls back into my life, demanding $50,000 to keep his filthy secret hidden, or else he'll destroy the only man who's ever truly been there for me and shatter the world of my children. Gasps rippled through the spectators' benches like a wave crashing ashore. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. A man whispered, "Oh my God," under his breath. The judge raised his hand for silence, but Sophia kept speaking her words, cutting through the quiet like shards of glass. I used to believe in fairy tales, in happy endings, but the real world doesn't work like that. The real world takes your dreams and turns them into nightmares when you least expect it. She swallowed, her eyes locked on Eric's pale, hollow face. You destroyed me, Eric. You destroyed us. You gambled my life away for $2,000 and a night in your bed. And when things got too real, you ran like a coward, while I was fighting for the lives of 3 tiny babies who'd never even taken a breath outside a machine. Her voice cracked. She tried to steady herself, gripping the railing tighter. Did you ever stop to think that maybe those babies were counting on you? That maybe I was counting on you, just to be there? Eric opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it, unable to form words. His eyes darted around the courtroom, looking anywhere but at her. Sophia kept going, her voice hard as steel. And now, you show up with your threats and blackmail, thinking you can tear down the man who stepped up when you walked out. You think you can tear down my family because you're drowning in debt and regret. Well, let me tell you something. She leaned forward, almost whispering, but every word deadly clear. I am not the same woman you left behind. A hush fell over the room, so complete even the cameras seemed to pause. Sophia drew a shaking breath. I have fought every single day for 12 years to build a life for my kids and for myself. I survived labor at 28 weeks, NICU machines, sleepless nights, and the silence of an empty bed. I carried the weight you should have carried. I cleaned up the mess you left behind. Her eyes blazed wet with fury and heartbreak. And if you think for 1 second that I'll let you blackmail me, or Thomas, or try to steal back the life you threw away, then you don't know me at all. Sophia pointed a trembling finger at him, her voice trembling like thunder. I will see you in hell before I ever let you hurt my family again. A single sob broke through from somewhere in the gallery. Eric's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge pounded his gavel for order, his voice booming. Mr. Johnson, you will remain silent until this court decides how to proceed. But Eric could only stare at Sophia, the woman he once thought he'd fooled so easily. She stood tall, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. And in that moment, no one in the courtroom doubted who was truly in control. Not Eric, not even the judge, but Sophia Bennett, the woman who refused to let betrayal define her life ever again. 12 years earlier, the city lights of Chicago blazed like diamonds spilled across velvet black skies. Wind gusted between towering skyscrapers, carrying the distant rhythm of R&B music thumping from rooftop bars where laughter and life pulsed in electric waves. Inside one of those bars, the Skyline Lounge. The air shimmered with warmth, the scent of bourbon perfume and sizzling steak. Sophia Bennett stood near the balcony railing, a slender woman of 28, with bright hazel eyes and chestnut hair cascading over one shoulder. Her laughter mingled with the music as she clinked glasses with a group of friends celebrating a birthday. She'd just landed her first position as a junior attorney at a mid-sized Chicago law firm, her eyes shining with the quiet confidence of a woman who believed life was unfolding exactly as it should. Then he appeared. Eric Johnson, tall, athletic build, square jaw, dark hair tousled just enough to look effortlessly handsome. His white dress shirt hugged broad shoulders as he leaned over the bar, flashing a grin that had probably opened doors his resume never could. His eyes, a piercing shade of ice blue, locked onto Sophia the moment he noticed her laughing under the golden glow of string lights. Eric lifted his glass, giving her a silent toast. A spark seemed to flash between them, an unspoken thrill that made the world hush for just a moment. Nearby, Thomas Cooper watched them both. Thomas, 29. Sandy blonde hair, wire-rimmed glasses, stood partly in the shadows, his quiet eyes scanning the scene. He wasn't as flashy as Eric. He didn't command a room. But there was a depth to Thomas, a gentle steadiness that held secrets few ever saw. He'd been Eric's best friend since high school, partners in mischief, partners in secrets. And tonight, they'd made one of the worst mistakes of their lives. Earlier that night, leaning close over the bar's sticky wood counter, Eric had nudged Thomas with his elbow, smirking. $2,000 says I can get Sophia Bennett into my bed before the end of the week. Thomas had flinched, his face caught between disbelief and disapproval. Eric, that's a human being, not a goddamn bet. You don't even know her. But Eric just shrugged, swirling bourbon in his glass. I know enough. She's single, she's gorgeous, and I like a challenge. Thomas sighed, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. Fine. You want to make a fool of yourself, be my guest? $2,000. So the deal was made and sealed with a reckless clink of glasses. Minutes later, Eric slid through the crowd towards Sophia, carrying 2 cocktails, confidence oozing from every step. Hey, you look like you've been working way too hard to be that beautiful, he said, flashing a grin. I'm Eric. Mind some company. Sophia blinked, surprised, then laughed softly. Well, since you brought me a drink, I guess that's only fair. Nearby, Thomas looked away, jaw tight. He couldn't help noticing the way Sophia's eyes sparkled when she smiled. How genuine her laughter sounded. He hated the idea of her being part of a joke. But he said nothing. Chicago's skyline glittered behind them as Sophia and Eric fell into easy conversation. He told her about working in real estate sales. She shared snippets about life as a new attorney. Their chemistry sizzled, laughter, soft touches, flirtatious smiles. Eric spun stories of big condo deals and penthouses with marble countertops. Sophia's eyes widened at his ambition, the way he seemed so sure of himself. But Thomas knew Eric too well. He knew the jokes, the casual conquests, the way Eric loved the chase, but never stayed for the consequences. Yet, as he watched them talk under neon lights, even Thomas couldn't deny the spark. Sophia's friends nudged her, giggling. Oh my God, girl, he's cute, one whispered. He's like movie star cute. Sophia blushed, hiding her face behind her glass. I'm just having fun. It's nothing serious. But inside, a tiny voice whispered, maybe this is something. Music swelled as Eric took her hand, pulling her toward the dance floor. Sophia hesitated, then followed, laughing as the beat vibrated beneath her heels. They moved together closer and closer until the world seemed to blur around them. Over in the corner, Thomas drained his beer and clenched his jaw. Some part of him wished he'd never agreed to that stupid bet. Because tonight, he saw something real beginning between them. And he knew that real things break the hardest, when the truth finally comes crashing in. Sophia never imagined how quickly a life could change, how swiftly a single connection could sweep her into an entirely different world. Within weeks, Eric became the center of her universe. He called her every morning before work, sent flowers to her office, each bouquet bigger than the last. He took her out to steakhouses on the Magnificent Mile where jazz bands played soft notes beneath crystal chandeliers. And on Sunday afternoons, they'd stroll hand in hand along the Lake Michigan shoreline. Wind tangled Sophia's hair as Eric wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, whispering, I could stay like this forever. Sophia believed him. She wanted to believe him. She'd never felt so seen, so wanted, so utterly cherished. For Thomas, those months were torture. He watched from the sidelines as Sophia fell deeper under Eric's spell. He kept telling himself he should confess about the bet, but every time he opened his mouth, Sophia's joyful face stopped him cold. Who was he to break her heart, just to ease his conscience? But secrets always come with a cost. One crisp autumn night, Eric invited Sophia to a rooftop dinner lit by flickering candles. The Chicago skyline sparkled around them like a million tiny stars. Halfway through dessert, Eric dropped to one knee, pulling a velvet box from his coat pocket. "Sophia Bennett, marry me." Tears filled her eyes. The crowd at nearby tables gasped and applauded as she whispered, "Yes." Thomas heard the news from mutual friends. He sat alone in his tiny apartment that night, staring at his phone, unable to bring himself to call and congratulate them. Because he knew. Behind Eric's perfect grin was a man who hated being tied down. A man who thrived on freedom, not commitment. Sophia and Eric married in December at a small stone chapel on the north side. Snow drifted outside the stained glass windows as she walked down the aisle in white satin, clutching red roses. Eric beamed at her, and for one perfect moment, even Thomas wanted to believe they'd make it. But happiness sometimes wears a fragile disguise. By spring, Sophia stared in shock at the bathroom mirror, a pregnancy test trembling in her hand. Eric found her sitting on the edge of the bathtub, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. He knelt beside her, lifted her chin, and said, "This is the best thing that's ever happened to us." And for a little while, it seemed true. They picked out paint colors for a nursery, shopped for baby clothes at upscale boutiques on Michigan Avenue. Eric even started putting aside money, talking about private schools and college funds. At her 12-week ultrasound, the technician squinted at the screen and exclaimed, "Oh wow, it looks like twins." Sophia burst out laughing. Eric's eyes widened, but he managed a grin. "2 kids, no problem, we'll figure it out." But Thomas, standing quietly in the corner because Sophia had invited him for moral support, saw the flicker of panic in Eric's eyes. Still, the pregnancy progressed. Sophia glowed. Eric posted sonogram photos on Facebook, bragging about becoming a dad. Everything seemed perfect, until one warm summer day in July. Sophia's friends gathered in their apartment for a baby shower. Pink and blue balloons bobbed against the ceiling. A cake sat on the table with delicate frosting flowers reading, "Welcome baby boys." Eric mingled, drinking sparkling cider, playing the charming father-to-be. Sophia felt a sharp pain in her lower belly, but tried to ignore it. Another wave of pain hit, so fierce she dropped her plate, shattering porcelain on the floor. She gasped, gripping her stomach as the color drained from her face. "Somebody help me, please." Her friends surrounded her, panic in their eyes. "Eric, call 911. At the hospital, everything became a blur of white walls, fluorescent lights, and the steady beep of machines. Doctors rushed Sophia into an emergency delivery at just 28 weeks. Eric paced the waiting room, pale and silent, knuckles white around his phone. Thomas arrived minutes later, breathless eyes wild with fear. He tried to speak to Eric, but Eric just waved him off, mumbling, I can't deal with this right now." Inside the operating room, Sophia's cries echoed off the sterile walls. Moments later, the doctor's voice broke through the chaos. "It's a boy." Sophia burst into tears of relief, until the doctor shouted again, "Wait, I see another head." Eric staggered back, eyes wide. "I thought they said twins. What is happening?" Seconds later, another tiny baby emerged, wailing weakly. "It's another boy," Sophia sobbed, half laughing, half crying. But then the doctor's face went pale. "Oh my God, there's another one." Eric nearly collapsed against the wall. A third infant, a little girl, arrived into the harsh glow of the surgical lamps. Triplets. Sophia lay, trembling, tears streaming into her hair. Eric stared at the 3 tiny babies swaddled in blankets, their fragile bodies hooked to tubes and monitors. He whispered, almost to himself, I can't do this, I can't." Sophia reached for his hand, but he pulled away. And in that instant, she felt a darkness settle into her chest, heavier than any weight she'd ever known. Because somehow, she knew Eric was already halfway out the door. The rhythmic beep of monitors echoed through the neonatal intensive care unit, where 3 tiny infants lay inside glowing incubators, fighting to breathe. Sophia sat slumped in a stiff hospital chair beside the glass walls, her hospital gown loose around her shoulders, her hair tangled and damp with sweat. Her eyes darted from one incubator to the next, drinking in the sight of delicate chests rising and falling under tangled tubes and pale pink blankets. Liam, Noah, Emma, their names were whispered over and over in her mind like a prayer. She turned, searching for Eric, but Eric was gone. Hours earlier, he'd kissed her forehead, muttering something about running to the store for diapers, and never returned. Nurses tried to comfort her, A doctor gently explained the baby's fragile condition. But Sophia felt like she was floating outside her own body, unable to absorb a single word. She clutched the thin cotton blanket tighter around herself as fear and betrayal burned through her veins. Outside the hospital windows, Chicago's skyline shimmered under neon lights. And somewhere in that sprawling city, the man she thought she'd spend her life with was vanishing into the night. By morning, Sophia was still alone. Her cell phone buzzed nonstop, friends, family, coworkers offering sympathy shock, questions she couldn't even begin to answer. "Where's Eric? Is he coming back?" She wanted to scream. Instead, she picked up the phone and dialed the one number she trusted. "Thomas, please, I need you." Thomas arrived at the hospital so fast, Sophia wondered if he'd broken every speed limit in Chicago. He found her hunched over a plastic chair in the hallway, shaking. He crouched down gently, touching her arm. "Sophia, look at me. I'm here okay, I'm not going anywhere." She collapsed into his chest, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Thomas held her without a word. In the days that followed, Thomas became a constant presence. He brought coffee, paid hospital bills when Sophia's credit cards were maxed out, talked to doctors on her behalf. He even changed tiny diapers for babies he'd never planned to help raise. One night, as the sun dipped behind the Sears Tower, Sophia sat beside Liam's incubator. The soft hiss of oxygen machines filled the silence. Thomas leaned close, his voice gentle. "Eric's an idiot. Those kids, they deserve better, and so do you." Sophia blinked at him, her eyes red and swollen. "I keep thinking, maybe he's hurt. Maybe he's lying in a ditch somewhere. But the police say there's no accident, no hospital record, nothing." Thomas hesitated, then said softly, "Sophia, he's not coming back." The words hit her like a slap. She lowered her head, pressing trembling fingers to her lips. "But how am I supposed to do this alone? 3 babies, no job, no money." Thomas reached out and took her hand. "You're not alone. You have me. Whatever you need, I'll help you." Sophia stared at him, a bitter laugh bubbling out of her chest. Why would you do that, Thomas? They're not your kids." Thomas held her gaze steady. "They're your kids, and that's enough for me." She wanted to believe him, but the world felt like it was collapsing around her. When the babies were finally stable enough to go home, Thomas was the one who helped pack up the hospital room. He carried boxes of baby clothes formula and breast pumps into Sophia's tiny apartment on the 2nd floor of an old brick building in Logan Square. That first night home, the crying started at midnight and didn't stop until dawn. Sophia stumbled from crib to crib, delirious with exhaustion. Emma wailed with a voice like a tiny siren. Liam's breathing monitor shrieked warnings every few minutes. Noah refused to latch during feedings, screaming until his little face turned purple. At 4 a.m, Sophia sank to the living room floor, burying her face in her hands. "I can't do this. I can't. I'm going to die." Thomas sat beside her, gently prying the bottle from her shaking fingers. "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know, and I'm not leaving you alone to figure this out." He rocked Emma in his arms until she finally fell asleep, murmuring soft words under his breath. The next weeks blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and endless diapers. Sophia's body ached, her hair thinned. She caught glimpses of herself in the bathroom mirror, pale, hollow-eyed, a stranger. But every time she felt herself sinking, Thomas was there. He fixed broken cabinet doors, cooked pasta when Sophia was too tired to lift a pan, gently touched her shoulder when the sobs broke loose without warning, little by little. Sophia realized she was leaning on him more than she wanted to admit, but shame clawed at her chest. Eric was still her husband, somewhere, and the thought of loving someone else felt like a betrayal. One evening, Thomas stayed to help with bedtime. As he read a book to Emma, Sophia sat watching him, her heart twisting with emotions she didn't want to name. The babies drifted off to sleep, and for a few minutes the apartment was silent. Thomas glanced up, eyes soft behind his glasses. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" She swallowed, afraid of the answer. "Yeah, sure." Thomas took a breath. "Would you ever be able to forgive him if he came back?" Sophia stared at him, a lump swelling in her throat. I don't know." And as she whispered those words, she realized that somewhere deep inside her, a tiny flicker of hope still refused to die, even after everything. 12 years later, Chicago pulsed with the rhythm of a city alive and relentless. The skyline gleamed beneath a pale winter sun. Yellow taxis honked as snow flurries twisted through the streets like whispers of secrets long buried. Inside a sleek glass office tower downtown, Sophia Bennett sat behind her mahogany desk on the 23rd floor of Golden Knox Law Group. She wore a tailored navy suit. Her hair, now a shade darker, framed a face sharper and more confident than the young woman who once danced beneath rooftop lights. Files towered on her desk, legal briefs, contracts, case files. But that morning, none of it mattered. Because standing in the doorways was a ghost from a lifetime ago. Eric Johnson, older now, hollow-eyed. His once dark hair sprinkled with gray. A cheap coat hung off his shoulders, wrinkled and stained as if he'd slept in it for days. Sophia's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto polished wood. Eric forced a grin, but his voice cracked like brittle ice. "Hey, Soph, mind if we talk?" Sophia felt her chest tighten so fiercely she could barely draw breath. For a second, all she could see was that hospital room. Tubes, monitors, screaming babies. And Eric's retreating back as he walked away. Her voice came out icy and calm. "You have 5 minutes." Eric closed the door. His eyes darted around the room, never settling on hers. "I've been having a rough time. Lost my job, my place. I know I screwed up, but maybe we can work something out." Sophia stared him down. "Work something out after 12 years. After abandoning me and your children." Eric ran trembling fingers through his hair. "I'm not here to cause trouble. But I need money, Sophia. And if you don't help me, I'll tell the kids everything." Sophia's jaw dropped. "Tell them what?" Eric swallowed, eyes glittering with a feverish desperation. "I'll tell them how Thomas and I made a bet. That I could sleep with you for $2,000. That their precious dad knew about it. That he lied to you all these years." Sophia felt her entire world tilt beneath her feet. You would destroy them, just for money." Eric's laugh was jagged and humorless. "I'm drowning in debt, Soph. Credit cards maxed out, payday loans. I've got collectors breathing down my neck. $50,000, that's all I'm asking. I keep my mouth shut. You get to keep your perfect life." Sophia's voice dropped sharp as a blade. "Get out!" But Eric stepped closer, lowering his voice until it dripped like poison. "Think about it. How long before the media finds out successful Chicago attorney's marriage built on a drunken bet? You'll lose clients. The kids will hate Thomas. It'll all come crashing down." Sophia clenched her fist so hard her nails bit into her palms. Eric's voice softened suddenly, like he was trying to play the man she once loved. "I don't want to do this, but you left me no choice." Sophia trembled with fury. "You left me, you left us, and now you want me to pay for your mistakes." Eric tilted his head, eyes cold. "Consider it payment for keeping your secret safe." He turned, pausing with his hand on the doorknob. 50 grand by next Friday. Or I go to the press, and to your kids." Then he slipped out the door, leaving the faint scent of stale cigarettes and desperation lingering in the room. Sophia sat frozen, staring at the space where he'd stood. A million thoughts screamed in her head. Her kids, her marriage, her career. Everything balanced on the edge of a blade. She dug her phone from her purse, her hands shaking. She scrolled through her contacts, hesitating only a heartbeat before pressing call. Thomas answered on the second ring. "Hey, Soph, what's up?" Sophia's voice broke. Eric's back. Silence stretched over the line like a wire pulled too tight. "Oh, God, what did he say?" Sophia swallowed, tasting bitterness and bile. "He wants $50,000, or he tells the kids about the bet, about everything." Thomas inhaled sharply. "Son of a bitch." Sophia wiped a tear from her cheek. "I don't know what to do, Thomas. I can't let him hurt them. Or you." Thomas's voice dropped low and deadly. "Listen to me, he's bluffing. Let me handle this." Sophia nearly laughed through her tears. "Handle this, how he's threatening to blow up our whole lives." Thomas hesitated. His next word sent an icy spear through her chest. "Sophia, there's something I need to tell you." Sophia gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. What is it, Thomas?" Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. "The bet, it was true. I did agree to it. I'm so sorry. I thought it was just a stupid joke, and I never meant for it to go this far." Sophia closed her eyes, dizzy, her entire body trembling. You knew, and you let me marry him." Thomas choked on his words. "I fell for you, Sophia. I fell for you hard. And I tried to stay away. But when Eric disappeared, I couldn't just leave you alone. And somewhere along the way, I realized I couldn't live without you." Sophia let out a sound between a sob and a laugh. "My whole life is a lie." Thomas's voice cracked. "Please, don't let him win. Don't let Eric destroy what we've built." Sophia hung up without another word. She sat in the silent office, breathing ragged, staring at the wedding photo on her desk. Her mind reeled with the truth, and the fresh betrayal blooming like poison in her chest. Outside, snow fell heavier, blanketing the streets below in white silence. As Chicago braced for a storm it never saw coming. The wind howled through Chicago's steel canyons, rattling windows and carrying flurries of snow like shards of glass. Sophia sat alone in her office, the city spread out beneath her lights, flickering like restless stars. She stared at her reflection in the window. A successful attorney, a mother, a survivor. But in that moment, she felt like a woman staring at the ruins of her entire life. Eric's threat pounded in her head louder than the storm outside. $50,000, or he'd blow everything apart. And now, Thomas's confession twisted the knife even deeper. Sophia closed her eyes, letting a single tear slip free. Then, she wiped her face, squared her shoulders, and picked up her phone, because she was done being a victim. Hours later, Thomas arrived at the apartment, his face lined with exhaustion and fear. He found Sophia pacing the hardwood floor's folders spread out across the dining table. Thomas cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "Soph, we need to talk." Sophia didn't even look at him. "I don't want to talk. I want to fight." Thomas blinked. "Fight? How?" Sophia slapped a thick folder into his hands. Paper trail, bank statements, social media posts, witness statements. Everything we need to prove Eric is trying to extort us. Thomas stared at the evidence, then lifted his eyes, voice shaking. "You're going to press charges." Sophia spun toward him, her eyes blazing. "Yes, I am done letting that man hold my life hostage." Thomas swallowed. "Sophia, I know I've lied to you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, don't let him tear us apart. I love you. I love the kids. I would give anything to keep our family safe." Sophia stared at him, 1,000 emotions colliding inside her chest. Anger, betrayal, love, she whispered, voice trembling. "Thomas, you were supposed to be the one person who never lied to me." He stepped closer. "I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life, but Eric is the enemy now, not me. Let's end this. Together." Sophia studied his face. The man who'd stood by her through every nightmare. The man who'd fed babies at 4 a.m. The man who'd loved her kids like his own. "Finally," she nodded. "Okay, let's bury him." They worked all night, compiling evidence, printing out photos, building a case thicker than a law textbook. Texts from Eric demanding money. Voicemails dripping with threats. Financial records proving his debts. Sophia called in favors from colleagues in the state's attorney's office. A quiet storm began to brew behind courthouse walls. 2 days later, Eric was arrested on Michigan Avenue, his wrists locked in cold steel cuffs. The news broke faster than wildfire. Local man arrested for attempted blackmail of prominent attorney Sophia Bennett. Social media exploded, comment sections filled with disbelief and outrage. At the first court hearing, Sophia sat in the front row, Thomas beside her. Eric shuffled into the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit, his face, gaunt eyes sunken. Sophia stared straight ahead, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched white. Eric's public defender stood and addressed the judge, voice quivering. "Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement." Eric cleared his throat. "Sophia, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I'm drowning. I've got nothing. No job, no home. I thought, maybe if I could get money I could start over." Sophia's lips parted, but no words came. Eric's eyes darted toward Thomas. "And you stole my life. You think I don't know how close you were to Sophia before I even disappeared. You think I don't know how fast you moved in the moment I was gone." Thomas clenched his jaw, eyes blazing. "You left her, Eric. You left those kids. Don't you dare put that on me." Eric's laugh was harsh. "And you never told her the truth, did you? About that night at Skyline Lounge? About the bet? You both lied. Don't stand there acting righteous." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sophia sat rigid, feeling every eye turn toward her. The judge banged his gavel. "That's enough, Mr. Johnson. This is not your stage for theatrics." Eric deflated, slumping into his chair. The prosecutor stood, voice crisp. "Your Honor, the state has overwhelming evidence that Mr. Johnson attempted to extort Ms. Bennett and her husband for $50,000. We also have records of his abandonment of familial obligations and evasion of child support for over a decade." The judge's face hardened. "Mr. Johnson, you have shown complete disregard for your responsibilities as a father, as a husband, and as a citizen. Your actions are despicable. Eric's eyes glistened, lips trembling. "I'm sorry." Sophia finally spoke, her voice clear and steady. "I don't want your apologies, Eric. I want my children safe. I want my life back." The judge leaned forward. "I am sentencing you to 8 years in state prison for attempted extortion and willful abandonment of dependents. This court will also impose restitution for unpaid child support." Eric's shoulders sagged. He turned to Sophia, eyes desperate. "Please, Soph, tell the kids I love them." Sophia's expression never changed. "You lost that right 12 years ago." The bailiff led Eric away, his chains clinking in the hushed courtroom. Sophia sat in stunned silence, the weight of years pressing down. And yet, a tiny flicker of relief sparked deep inside her chest. Thomas reached for her hand, tentative eyes brimming with regret. She hesitated, then let him hold it. Because even in a world shattered by betrayal, sometimes the only way forward is together. Snow fell like a silent curtain over Chicago, blanketing streets and rooftops in soft white. Inside the Bennett Cooper home, the warm glow of a Christmas tree flickered across the living room walls. Ornaments sparkled, casting tiny reflections of red and gold. Sophia sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a wool blanket, a steaming mug of coffee cupped between her hands. Across the room, Thomas knelt on the floor, helping Liam, Noah, and Emma piece together a plastic train set. Laughter rang out as the train finally clicked into place, but behind Sophia's smile, a shadow still lingered. Eric's arrest had closed one chapter, but healing was another story entirely. Late one night, while the kids slept, Sophia found Thomas in the kitchen washing dishes. She hesitated in the doorway, watching the man who'd saved her 1,000 times over, and yet who'd also kept secrets that left scars she wasn't sure would ever fade. Thomas sensed her there and turned, wiping his hands on a towel. "Soph, you okay?" Sophia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I can't stop thinking about everything he said, about the bet, about how much of my life was built on lies." Thomas swallowed guilt, pressing deep lines into his forehead. "I hate what I did. I hate that I let Eric rope me into something so cruel. But everything I've done since then, every moment with you, it's all been real. I need you to believe that." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling old pain bubbling up like a bruise pressed too hard. "I want to believe you, Thomas. God, I do. But part of me still wonders, would you have chosen me if there was never a bet?" Thomas stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Sophia, I didn't fall in love with you because of a bet. I fell in love with you because you're fierce, because you're brilliant, because you're stubborn as hell and refuse to quit. Even when the whole world crumbles around you, I'd choose you 1,000 times over. No bet in the world could change that." Sophia let out a trembling breath. "And the kids, do you ever wish they weren't mine and Eric's?" Thomas's eyes glistened as he shook his head. "Those kids are mine, blood or not. They're mine because I've rocked them to sleep, cleaned up their vomit, taught them how to ride bikes. They're mine because I love them. Same as I love you." Sophia felt a tear slide down her cheek. "I'm so tired, Thomas, so tired of fighting, of questioning everything, of wondering who I can trust." Thomas brushed a thumb over her cheek. "Then don't fight alone. Let me carry some of it, please. Just let me in." Sophia collapsed against him, burying her face in his shoulder. Outside, snow kept falling, gently, quietly, as though the world itself was trying to soothe her wounds. Weeks passed. Eric remained in prison. But one day a letter arrived in Sophia's mail, the envelope stamped with the insignia of the Illinois Department of Corrections. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, Eric's handwriting sprawled across lined paper, words shaky and uneven. "Sophia, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I ruined everything. I just wanted you to know. I see it now, what I gave up. I see the family I could have had, the love I threw away. I'm sorry for all of it. Tell the kids, if they ever want to know me, I'll be here. I'll be better, I swear." Sophia sat staring at the letter for a long time, heart pounding in her chest. She tucked the paper back into the envelope and slipped it into a drawer. Some things were better left where they belonged. Yet part of her felt lighter, because even if Eric never changed, she finally understood that forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for her. Spring arrived, melting the snow, coaxing tiny green shoots from the frozen earth. One Saturday morning, Sophia and Thomas took Liam, Noah, and Emma to Millennium Park. The kids raced across the grass, laughing under a pale blue sky. Sophia paused, watching them, her eyes shining. Thomas slipped his hand into hers. "Hey, you okay?" Sophia smiled. "I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am." Thomas kissed her temple, his voice low. "Then let's keep building this life, one day at a time." Sophia gazed out over Chicago's skyline. "I used to think love meant perfection, that it was supposed to be easy. But love, real love, is messy. It's forgiveness. It's fighting for each other, even when it's hard." Thomas squeezed her hand. Sophia turned, her voice steady, her eyes glowing. "And you know what? I'm not defined by my past. I'm not a victim of someone else's choices. I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. And if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. Because every scar, every sleepless night, brought me here." She glanced at her children laughing in the sun. "That's my greatest victory." Her voice softened, thoughtful. "I want people to know, no matter how dark it gets, no matter who betrays you, you have the power to rebuild. You have the power to forgive. And sometimes, the life you create after the storm is even more beautiful than the one you lost." A breeze rustled through the trees. Sophia tilted her face toward the sky, breathing in the promise of a new season. "I'm Sophia Bennett, and I'm the author of my own story.